All right, no day trips today. It's just a chatting video. I'm going to talk specifically about the 3 different ways living in Germany has changed us.
So I think before we get started, we should talk a little bit about ourselves.
Just a smidge.
I'm Camille, this is Ben. We're 2 foreigners living in Germany. I'm originally from the United States. Ben is originally from Britain. We've been here almost 3 years. We've been doing
Never thought we'd last 3 years.
We've been doing this YouTube channel for 2 years, and we primarily, as you might know, maybe we're a really small channel, we cover day trips in Bavaria.
All about day trips, never really about us. And even though I still don't want it to be about us, to talk about how we changed, you need to know what we changed from. So I think it makes sense to do just a bit of backstory.
Yeah, so I'm an American. Prior to living in Germany, I had lived in Washington, D.C. for 7 years. I went to university there and then worked in D.C. for 3 years before moving here. And you also lived there.
Yeah, no, I lived in D.C. there with
Together.
you. Why are you being so coy about it? We lived in the same apartment. But no, before that, I mean, my backstory is a little different than yours. I grew up in a relatively small village in the UK before I moved to America. So I've spent a lot of time in both places. That's why my accent is pretty terrible. Nobody can ever guess where I'm from, and that's probably pretty reasonable. But yeah, we mostly lived in DC, and that's what I'm gonna be comparing this to. So I kind of want to stick the comparisons to our lives in Washington, DC, a big city, and our lives in Munich, also a big city. I feel like that's more apples to apples than any of the other places that we've lived.
So the first way that we are radically changed by living in Germany is the way we interact with public transportation.
Because it's everywhere.
Yeah, I think this is more true for me because I work as a freelance English teacher, so I go all over Munich doing private lessons, and I don't have a car. I don't want a car. I really thought I was going to have to get a car.
We had a budget when we moved to Munich. We had a dealer picked out. You picked out the colors of the car. You're very specific about the colors. You wanted a Mini Cooper in duck egg blue with, I wanted orange stripes. We had the money packed away. All we had to do was take a train to the dealership and would have been in, and we never did.
And honestly, it never crossed my mind.
Never thought about it.
I think after living here for 6 months, I was like, wait, we never bought a car and we were going to. We were supposed to.
Like it was a chore we should have ticked off, you know, sign up for water, get your Anmeldung done, go buy a car. We're like, oh no.
So I go all over Munich using a combination of the S-Bahn, which is sort of the commuter train, the U-Bahn, which is like a subway, Straßenbahn, which is the tram, and then the bus, and walking also. Sometimes e-scooters. And
little e-scooter.
And I never have any problems, and it's so nice. I never want to own a car again. I think it costs about 65 euros a month for me to buy a pass to use the public transportation for all the places I just described. I'm just saving so much money.
But let's compare that to America. We loved public transport in concept, but never in practice.
We could never use it. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah, yours is the best.
Yeah, in Washington, D.C., well, we lived right outside in a town called Arlington, if anybody's familiar with Northern Virginia. It's the best place to be.
It's good.
So we lived about 1 block away from the Ballston Metro. Am I giving
Closer.
Am I giving away too much about our past?
Oh, you can say Ballston.
The Ballston
Hilarious.
Metro. Okay, so we live about 1 block away from the Ballston Metro.
But closer to the Ballston Metro than we do any of the stops here.
Yeah,
right, and we live really close to the stops here in Munich, but even closer in DC.
So I commuted into DC every day. My place of work was about 7 miles away. But I took the public transportation maybe 6 times. And
I mean, you tried, right? I think it's really important to point out you did try.
And it took me about twice as long, even during rush hour. So rush hour, it would take me about an hour and a half to get home, and it just wasn't, it took longer with public transportation.
I mean, there aren't dedicated bus lanes for most of it. The buses were unreliable because they're not funded enough. And then you'd have to connect in city center DC. For me, I had the best case scenario. I was going from Arlington into city center DC, the Foggy Bottom area. For anyone who's familiar with the city, I worked in the Watergate, which is pretty cool. You know, the building that ruined all future conspiracy naming schemes.
You can still go there?
It's a good place.
You worked there?
Yeah. I was also shocked, to be honest, when I interviewed there, and they were like, just come down to the Watergate. Drink on the roof. There's a good liquor store in the basement. Anyway, that's actually not near a metro line. You'd really think it would be, but there's one on one side of the river because the Watergate is right on the river, beautiful location, but there's no metro. There's one on the other side, which is a long walk from Roslyn, or there's the actual Foggy Bottom, hilariously named metro station, and that's still a good 10-15 minute walk, which doesn't sound bad, right? In American public transportation, a 15-minute walk. But when was the last time you had to do a 15-minute walk from any of the things you've taken when you're on your jaunts? Never, right?
One time.
Right, once.
I did a Craigslist
It
deal
sticks out.
where I bought a cat bed. And I took like the end of the S-Bahn to this village, and this woman
Right,
lived
now you're
like
in a village.
15 minutes away from the train station.
Right, we're
in
not
the
comparing
village.
villages though, are we? We're comparing like
one time.
people.
Pretty sure there's a bus too, but
There's gotta be.
yeah.
And so that's just how bad it was,
Yeah.
and how truly good it is. Cats.
Kitties.
We're gonna do it again.
Which cat was
I
that?
think it's both of them. I think they're fighting.
No, he's probably.
Shush. And so honestly, that's just how bad it was, right? We really tried to use the public transport in America, but it was so inconvenient. It was so useless so many times. The amount of times I would actually just like take a photo of the station being completely backed up because there's like ancient moss growing on the red line and there was a fire on one of them. It was always broken. I mean, Germans in Munich are always talking about how like the S-Bahn is unreliable. They know nothing of unreliable public transport.
That's always
It was
so funny to
terrible.
me when people in Munich complain about the public transportation here.
Like it could be better. I mean, like I remember a day that I went down into the Boston metro station. I just saw, it was backed up the entire platform, bodies everywhere.
Bodies?
Standing up, they were alive. But I remember distinctly a day that I went to the Boston metro. I was all gussied up, ready to go into the office, and just the platform clogged. More people than I've ever seen in my life. All the way up to the turnstile. I just took a picture of it, sent it to my boss, and I was like, I'm not coming in today, mate. Like, it's not happening. And that is something I can't imagine. We've had a couple rail closures here, but there's always a kind of a backup. In DC, you kind of have the metro and then a poorly funded bus system. But here, because you have the S-Bahn, U-Bahn, tram, and buses and everything, you know, one time there was a closure on the S-Bahn and we just walked across to the U-Bahn and it took slightly longer and a slightly more filled carriage. But there was always and now we will solve the problem.
The further you live out from Munich,
harder it gets.
The more difficult it gets, but when you're in the center of Munich, it's easy to sort of mix and match. So long story short, I'm saving a lot of money, so much more happy, easier to get around, don't have to pay a car payment, don't have to pay for gas or car repairs. It's great.
Or a parking spot.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you said that, but that would be very expensive
That would
in
be
Munich.
too.
Those things are full apartment prices.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the second way that our lives here have changed. And I think we've talked about public transport enough, though technically that's never true. You can never talk about it enough. But anyway, that's a different video, not just bikes. What's the second way that kind of our life just changed?
The grocery store. We go to the grocery store in a radically different way.
But it's true, it's true.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that's like cliche for a reason. Like everyone talks about it after they move here. But yeah. Now we're going to talk about it. What would you say is a big difference? Like just on the whole of it, right?
We go to the grocery store multiple times a week. It's
I'll go
really
every day
weird.
if you let me.
We went today.
We did.
Yeah,
I'll go tomorrow.
Anyway, yeah, probably actually. Yeah, so we go to the grocery store multiple times a week and do little shops, as your family would say. We'll buy like maybe like 6 items and go home, and then maybe 2 days later I'll be like getting ready to make lunch and go, oh, I don't have blah 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 that I need for lunch, and it's no big deal. It doesn't ruin my day. I just run to the grocery store really fast.
Exactly.
And I think that's because, especially in the city where we live in, I don't know how it is in the rest of Germany, but it seems to be very similar.
Just comparing our experiences.
The grocery stores are very small, and they encourage you, and they're really accessible by
they're everywhere. How many are we near, do you think? Like with walking distance, right?
Yeah, I think 3. Well,
3 or 4.
walking distance, way more than that, but like quick.
That's the thing. There are so many, and they're spread out everywhere, that when I say walking distance, you're like, oh, that blows up the scope. I was talking about like
within 3 minutes.
Could I fall over into that door?
I think there are 2 that I could fall over into.
Easily.
Anyway, so besides there being lots of grocery stores and them being quite small, there are also just lots of opportunities to shop at like small specialty things. There are tiny green grocers. There are a lot of butchers.
Yep, we have a lot of butchers and
bakeries and little markets that you can go to. So it just makes buying groceries sort of this, not daily occurrence, but it happens more than the American or the British, like I'm going to do a big shop, as your family would say.
I would say big shop.
Once or twice a week.
Right. I mean, I always thought that was kind of funny, right? Because we grew up in completely different countries, different continents. And that was still something that was very of our childhood, was going on a big shop.
Oh my God, I hated it.
With my mum and dad.
On Saturday morning or Sunday morning.
Oh, God forbid on Sunday. You can't do that out here either.
Yeah.
The grocery stores are closed on Sundays, but we're not talking about that. And it's kind of sad because when I was a little kid and I was, my grandma would look after me while my parents were at work, we used to walk into the village, the local village, because she lived just on the outskirts of it. And there was a butcher and there was a baker. And I remember her taking me in, right? I think I've told you plenty about it, but I'm going to reminisce again. We'd go in there and I'd ask him if he could cut the meat out in little dinosaur shapes. And he'd say, I'll just be a few minutes. So we'd wander off to the bakery next door, come back, pick up the meat, go home and cook it. And we would do that all the time. And at some point, as I grew older, when I was living with my parents more because of their busier schedules, because a Walmart was opened up in Derby, which is the big city where I grew up. And all of a sudden, big shop all the time. That was the only way we interacted with the grocery store. And it's really sad to say, but that bakery and that butchery, they're closed near my grandma, so she can't even
Not
tremble.
to say that doesn't happen in Germany, obviously.
It does, there are big stores
It's a problem all throughout the world, but in our experience in the past 3 years we've been living
City
here.
centre Munich, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, even out in the villages, I know we've seen local bakeries, local butchers, markets, and we see people shopping, buying smaller quantities of things and shopping much more locally.
Right.
But either way, this has massively reduced a lot of anxiety that we experience. Like, I didn't even realize I was sort of feeling anxious about going to the grocery store.
We'd spend so much time planning out the meta. What time should we go for the big shop with all the people? How are we going to miss it so that it's not that that's just a horrible slog of an experience. I'm sure we've all experienced it when the grocery store is just full and you're standing in line for hours with your cart and it gives me nightmares
and
now.
I feel like no matter how well we plan for the grocery store, at the end of the week or the end of the 2 weeks,
strict.
We'd like run out of something and it was just such a hassle to
or the
go
worst,
to the grocery store.
opposite of that, you buy too much of one thing and it goes bad. Right?
I forgot I was going to say this. Yes, since moving to Germany, very proud, I have not thrown away any food because it went bad. And I used to do that all the time. Like, and I'm a planner too. Like, I really tried to avoid that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you do though.
Yeah.
But but you haven't had to focus on reducing waste. It's just happened, right? And I think that's because of the system in that way. When we were living in Arlington, there were no small grocery stores that we were near. The grocery store that we were closest to, and it was walking distance, was massive. The parking lot was massive. It was on the side of a massive road. It was a horrible walk. I can go to the grocery store through almost entirely pedestrian-only streets. It's wonderful. I barely see a car. I get weirded out when I walk near roads with cars now. And that was not the case in Arlington. So it just felt like this big thing. And then they always have big trolleys. None of the grocery stores that we shop at have trolleys. So you couldn't have a ton of groceries if you tried. Like, you'd really have to try.
I was thinking about this yesterday. A couple of days ago, I saw a woman when I was buying a few things at the grocery store, and they have little baskets that you put into a trolley, and she had that, and it was full to the brim with food. And I remember, like, kind of being judgy in my head and being like,
you've lived in Germany too long now that you're judging people at the grocery store.
I was like, why do you have so much food?
What did you do?
What are you doing? And I was like, oh, maybe she's like throwing a party.
Could be a
or
party.
Something. But
maybe she likes a big shop.
We never buy that much food.
Never.
We never buy that much food at the grocery store anymore.
There's this joke that goes around on all the meme pages, and it's kind of like how you make friends when you first meet here. You go like, oh, hi, I'm not from Germany. Aren't the people at the grocery store really, really fast at checking you out? Doesn't it give you anxiety?
Yeah.
And like, they're not wrong. The people that check you out at a German grocery store are ruthlessly efficient and they're quick. And also you don't get the luxury like you do in America where they bag it for you, so you have to kind of be doing both. But that's not the full picture. It's not just that they're fast. I think what a lot of people aren't queuing into, because it's subtle, is that nobody has a cart full of groceries. Everyone's checking out a basket. You know, it's like 20 items or less. It's the whole store.
You have like 20 seconds to pack away your like 6
before they're like,
items
now it's time for you to pay. And the people behind you are getting frustrated because you need to be quick. And that definitely is a thing. But I think it really, to me, it's not just that they're fast, because the American grocery store workers are perfectly efficient in their own right. But it's that they don't have to check out a cart. Of course it will go quickly. Even if the Germans were slow, you'd never notice, because how long does it take to check out a basket? And so when that happens, you know, it really freaks out foreigners. And it really messed with me as well, because I wouldn't feel like, you're still learning the language and they're talking to you and you don't know what's going on. So that you're kind of weirded out by all of that. And in your head, you should wait a trolley's amount before it's your turn, but it's not. And so I think that kind of leads to that kind of entry-level kind of foreigner anxiety.
More anxiety.
More anxiety.
Like we feel less anxiety.
You feel less anxiety now, but you got to admit, during the first month or two, it's like, oh God, what am I doing wrong? What does it mean to take a receipt? Why do they keep handing it to me?
But now I have fully acclimated to judging people in front of me who are being slow.
Yep, you have. And I think it's personally, I like it a lot more than a big shop.
Me too.
Because it never feels like a big chore. I didn't pour that very well. It never feels like a big chore that you have to pencil into your weekend. It's just something you do constantly, a little bit. And I like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
A lot better. Okay, so for our third and final way that we've been radically changed by Germany.
On a day-to-day.
On a day-to-day.
Sorry, this is really important.
We're going to talk about existing outside, which sounds really, really weird. But
so pretentious and possibly misleading, because people might look at us and hopefully if you've watched our channel, nobody else does, but I hope you do. We do a lot of day trips. We're always hiking, castle ruins.
So people might think, well, of course you exist outside. Yes, it is very easy in Germany to exist out in the mountains because there are lots and lots of trains.
Well,
easy
in
to get
Bavaria, not all of Germany has the beautiful mountains.
But even for those normies who aren't obsessed with getting out into the mountains every single weekend like we are, just being outside in a very
She's gonna knock over the plant. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but one of our little cats is behind, sleeping behind that plant over there on the your right hand side of the frame.
But she's kind of wonky.
She's not wonky, and she's not gonna knock it over. But I am really worried she might.
For normies who aren't obsessed with going into the mountains every single weekend like we are, you can spend just as much time outside and be just as happy. So, for example, if we decided that we never wanted to leave the city ever again, we could spend just as much time outside because Germany, Germany, yes, but Munich has so many public parks that are jam-packed in the warmer seasons. Not even just in the warmer seasons.
Just all over. I mean, the Englische Garten, some people, English gardens, I hate that. But I don't like that pronunciation when you just translate.
Called out.
Sorry. I find it really ugly when people say the English gardens. Anyway, so the Englische Garten is incredibly packed all summer. People swimming. You've probably seen the surfers. But it's everybody just out hanging about. You can drink in public in Germany. It's kind of an important little tweak. So you can go buy some cheap beers from the Späti on the corner, just a convenience store, and just sit.
So it's not uncommon for groups of friends to just have a chill weekend in the Englische Garten, get some beers, hang out, play games, go into the Eisbach, which is a little river, for a dip, and then come back out. I see birthday parties, I see work gatherings.
We've had birthday parties there.
I see family reunions. Yeah, that one was really fun.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so it
costs nothing.
We have a lot of public parks. There are tons of cafes with really lovely outdoor seating that is also very aesthetic and just wonderful to be in.
I think that's a great point.
And in Europe in general, the waiters don't sort of push you to
stay there as long as you want, right?
To take the check like they do in the United States. So it's not uncommon for us to spend 2-3 hours at a beer garden or at a cafe.
No, I think that's a really important point because when we were in America, when we talked about going outdoors, right? When we're living in a city, it was always driving out into like the Appalachian Mountains or something like that. And that's really just not what we mean in this case, right? We're clearly talking about just going to a park, but I'd take it one level further. And I think the pedestrian-only streets of Munich, that's being outdoors, mate. You know, if you're sitting in a cafe near Marienplatz or Viktualienmarkt or something like that, and you're just hanging out for a couple hours in that sun at a beer garden or a cafe, that's outdoors, you know, and it feels refreshing and it feels like a wonderful thing to do. So the spectrum's huge.
Yeah, and I think the chances to hang out outside that we had when we were living in DC and the chances
the comparison
that are analogous with here, even the ones in DC, they just weren't as pleasant. The aesthetic, the vibes were off. The vibes were off.
The National Mall is so boring. It's wonderful if you're a tourist, right? And it's wonderful if you're a runner. I think a lot of people like to run it. It's like a cool thing to do. But if you want to just go, I never saw the sheer amount of people that we see here in Munich at the Isar or the English Garden. I never saw that in DC. There's no restaurants there. There's nothing for you to do. You can't drink outside, so you can't really bring a good picnic. You know, not that you have to drink to have a good time, but you know what I mean. So it's just, we never went there. Did we ever once go to the National Mall to just sit?
No, because it's in between Independence and Constitution Avenue, which are so busy.
So it's like, and that's a huge, national park. Now there are some other parks and they're okay, but it was just never so simple. Even when we lived in Boston, the cafes aren't like that in America, right? You have to go get a table. The waiter's always kind of harassing you in a way, and they kind of want you to leave. And I understand it because they need to rotate tables and all that. So it never just feels like you can just be outside.
Yeah.
And we are outdoorsy people. We did all the different types of things in Virginia that you could do. Anything in a 3.5 hour radius. We did day trips. We should have filmed it, but we never thought to do that back then. Yeah. And even then, people like us struggled to spend time outdoors in Washington, D.C.
It's just so accessible here, and I love it. I think that I'm just so much happier being able to do that. And I think it's very culturally important for Germans too, because it just seems like as soon as it's even a little bit warm, just everywhere is mobbed. All the outdoor seating, all the places in the gardens are sort of...
I mean, even now as it's turning colder, people have blankets so that they can just wrap up in a blanket outside in a cafe because they will not go indoors yet. I think that's wonderful. I really do. And it ties into everything else in a way. The public transport is so good so that you can easily get to the Englischer Garden. The grocery stores, small, convenient, everywhere. As long as it's not Sunday, you can easily go and get what you need and go have an impromptu picnic. There are so many places to do it. Just everything coalesces to make your day-to-day more relaxed, more friendly, easier. Just overall, it's my day-to-day is more pleasant, I have to be honest.
Yeah, so these are 3 ways that our lives have been radically changed since moving to Germany. I think they've been changed for the better. Let us know below what you think. Has this been your experience when you've lived here, when you've visited Germany?
Washington, D.C. Do you think we're wrong? Did we do Washington, D.C. wrong? Let us know in the comments.
Let us know. So again, we are a travel YouTube channel. We make a lot of local content in Bavaria. So if you live here or are visiting soon, check us out. I feel like we do a really good job being very, very
If you want to check out some day trips, we always include the logistics so that you can figure out how to get there yourself and you know how difficult it is. I think that's something that sets us apart. Let us know if you liked this. We've debated making this content for years. We always wanted to, but we never got around to it. We were always worried it would be rambly, boring, and just unhelpful.
Let us know if that's what it was.
Is that true? Do we need to go back outside to a castle ruin to hold your attention? Or should we start doing these? Honestly, just let us know. I'd be quite curious.
So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram.
See you later.
Bye.